Good night.
Your voice, your vote. Legalizing recreational marijuana in Oklahoma. This News Channel 8 Town Hall meeting is sponsored by Grow Generation.
Hi, everyone, and good evening. Thanks for joining us for the special commercial-free edition of News Channel 8 at 6. I'm Mark Bradshaw.
And I'm Brenna Rose. We're just a few hours away from the first votes being cast, deciding the fate of State Question 820. You're being asked whether to approve recreational marijuana as well as criminal justice reform on marijuana-related crimes and convictions. Early voting starts at 8 in the morning at county election boards. You can also vote early on Friday between 8 and 6. All polls will be open on Tuesday from 7 to 7. If requested an absentee ballot, you can mail it back or drop it off in person. All that matters is that it's received no later than 7 on Election Day.
All right, before the polls open in the morning, we want to make sure you have all the information you need to make an informed decision. And to do that, we brought in a couple of guests.
We certainly did. First, we have the Yes on 820 campaign senior advisor Ryan Kiesel. He's an attorney who represented Seminole in the State House for 6 years and is a former executive director for ACLU Oklahoma.
Terry White is representing No on 820. She's the CEO for Mental Health Association Oklahoma. She served as the state's Secretary of Health, spent 13 years as a commissioner for the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. She also has a master's in social work. News Channel 8 anchor John Hayes is also standing by to give you a voice in the discussion. There's John. Hi, John. We're streaming this newscast live on both Facebook and YouTube right now. We're easy to find. Just search at News Channel 8 Tulsa. John will be monitoring the comments. You can post a question there for our guests. John, we'll check in with you in just a few minutes.
So let's get things started, Ryan. We're going to start with you in 1 minute. Why should Oklahomans, in your opinion, vote yes?
Thank you. I'm a two-time cancer survivor. Last fall, I was going through a radiation procedure, and I was using medical marijuana to supplement what my oncologists were doing at MD Anderson. In the middle of all of that, I somehow let my medical marijuana card expire. Now, according to the letter of the law, I could have been arrested. I could have lost my job, my law license could have been in jeopardy, and according to some of the opponents of State Question 820, I could have even lost custody of my kids. Now, I know that that's not right, and I know that Oklahomans don't believe that that's right either. And there's a way to fix that. We passed State Question 820. We follow the lead of 21 other states, and keep in mind that of those 21 other states that have legalized marijuana, not a single one has gone back on that. They haven't changed their mind. We legalize marijuana. We have a strong, regulated tax system. We have security measures for children. We make sure that we're taxing it and creating over $100 million in revenue for education and health care. And we free up law enforcement resources by ending harsh penalties for adults that are caught with small amounts of marijuana.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. Terry, 1 minute to give voters, convince them to vote no on 820.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here today. I think the argument on State Question 820 is very clear. Is marijuana good for our state? Is it good for our health? And most importantly, is it good for our children? And the fact is the science is very clear. And the reason I stepped up and said I was willing to co-chair the No on State Question 820 campaign is because the science is clear that marijuana, particularly high-content THC marijuana, is very dangerous for brains, particularly brains under the age of 25. And 30 years of prevention science and research shows us anytime we legalize a product, not medical marijuana, not talking about that, but talking about recreational marijuana, anytime we legalize a product, we make it available recreationally, and we normalize its use. We say it's available, you don't have to go through any precursors to get it. We make it in this state question, and I encourage you to read the state question clearly, we normalize its use and say there's very few penalties, if any, for using it in a public place, no matter who's around, including children. What happens is we see an increase in usage across all age groups, including children, even if it says it's illegal for children. And voters know that. It's just like alcohol. Alcohol is not supposed to be available to anyone under the age of 21, but guess what? Our kids have access. Anytime you legalize a product and you make it widely available, use increases,
Terry,
and so do the consequences.
1 minute is up.
Thank you.
Is there a chance that I could respond to some of that?
Well, you will, pretty soon.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
We'll give you a chance.
Outstanding.
Good.
Now, there are several parts to the state question. It's not just whether voters want recreational marijuana. It's also whether they want to make changes to the criminal justice system.
Before we dive deeper into that, News Channel 8's Sam Gelfand breaks down exactly what voters are being asked to approve.
The law, State Question 820 reads, requires resentencing, reversing, modifying, and expunging certain prior marijuana-related judgments and sentences unless the state provides an unreasonable risk to a person. Damian Shade of Yes on 820 sees this as a huge benefit to Oklahomans.
A path of clearing old marijuana convictions for the thousands and thousands of Oklahomans who still have those convictions on their records.
We read this portion of the state question to Craig Mays and Rogers County's District Attorney Matt Ballard. How do you interpret that sentence?
I think it allows wholesale expungement of offenses like trafficking in marijuana and impacting people who have dealt marijuana previously.
Why do you think they would put it in there?
There's probably a misunderstanding about our current expungement laws. Already, if somebody convicted of a low-level offense can have their offense expunged, there are even forms in the statute that assist with that.
The OSBI says 5,000 Oklahomans were arrested for simple marijuana possession in 2020 alone. Oklahoma also sees more federal convictions for marijuana possession than any other state in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. Ballard admits the state question's unreasonable risk clause is probably meant for dealers and traffickers. However,
it adds litigation, it adds time. And certainly it makes it much more difficult for us to ensure that people know what people have been convicted of.
Tulsa County District Attorney Steve Kunzweiler doesn't like the wording either.
I kind of call this criminal justice reform hidden in the veil of legalization of marijuana.
You know, a minor tweak can make major changes. If this had gone through the normal legislative process, that these are things that we could have pointed out, we could have approached, but because it's a state question, we don't have that opportunity.
All right, let's get to Terry first here. What are your thoughts on the wording, modifying and expunging instead of modifying or expunging?
I think this is a really important point to discuss, and that is the full content of the state question. I've actually stood up for decades in my career in mental health and said marijuana should be decriminalized. People should not be in police cars, jail cells, or prison cells for marijuana. It is a healthcare issue, and they should be in a healthcare facility. But what you look at in that state question is all the other things that it's doing, increasing access, normalizing the product. All of the other things are the big consequences to be concerned about. If that was a standalone issue, it might be a different story, but Oklahomans have to look at the full language and all of the things that are going to happen.
Ryan, I'll give you a chance to respond.
Well, you know, we don't have to speculate. We have 21 other states that we can look at. The Journal of American Medical Associations, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, the federal government's experts on this, they have found time and again that teen and adolescent drug use or marijuana use in states that have legalization does not go up. In fact, there's a study in Colorado that shows that it actually went down. So the idea that we just normalize this and we increase access, that's just not true. It's also important to remember that this isn't a debate about whether we have marijuana in Oklahoma or not. Marijuana is here. It's a matter of how we deal with it. Do we want a safe, regulated system that taxes marijuana, that makes sure that people have legal access to products? And I think, you know, when Terry says that we could have decriminalization, how would you do that and not create chaos? I mean, frankly, if you don't have a safe, regulated system, where are those folks going to go and buy their marijuana? They're going to go buy it from a drug dealer who isn't going to be checking an ID, who isn't going to be making sure that it's sold in a child-proof container, who isn't going to be making sure that it's a tested product that's not contaminated with other chemicals or even worse, other drugs like fentanyl. You have to have a safe, legal access market that goes along with decriminalization.
Do you think including criminal justice reform in the state question will hurt the chances come election day?
Absolutely not. I know that Oklahomans support this, and unlike the opponents of State Question 820, who have worked for decades against criminal justice reform at the state capitol and at the ballot box, Oklahomans want this. They know that it doesn't make sense to have a criminal justice system that puts people in jail, arrest 4,500 people. In just 2021 alone, 4,500 people in Oklahoma were arrested for small amounts of marijuana. Even an arrest can turn your life upside down. And that takes away law enforcement resources from serious and violent crimes that they should be investigating and working on. Every one of those arrests means hours that law enforcement officer is off the streets. I want them on the streets working on serious crimes and not policing low-level, small amounts of marijuana.
Terry, a response.
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand when Ryan is citing one study in Colorado, the methodology of that study has been questioned. There have been studies in every single state that has legalized marijuana that shows valid and reliable scientific studies, and science is what we have to use in the world of healthcare, that shows usage among youth under the age of 25, our most vulnerable population, has increased when they've moved from medical marijuana to legalized marijuana. And it is a fallacy to think it's anything different. There is a reason why big tobacco and marijuana are funding these campaigns across the nation, and it's because they know that when young brains get addictive substances in them, like high-content THC marijuana, the addiction circuitry gets turned on. And once that happens, all their profits go up, no matter what the addictive substance. And so make no mistake, when he cites this article and says it was the American Journal of Medicine, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Pediatric Association, and the American Medical Association are opposed to legalization. Standing on this side of the issue is healthcare.
All right, let's check in with News Channel 8, John Hayes Manning, our Facebook page and YouTube channel, so you can get your questions about State Question 820 answered.
John, what do you have?
Yeah, our first question comes from Robert. He asked, and we'll pose this to Ryan here. He asked, with the state having so many illegal medical marijuana production farms, is this really the time to legalize recreational marijuana?
This is the absolute time to legalize marijuana. State Question 788 did not end prohibition. We've got to be very clear about that. This will give law enforcement new tools and a ton of new resources to go after these illegal grows. Make no mistake, I want to close every single illegal grow in the state of Oklahoma. I want to make sure that responsible business owners that are following the law, that are checking IDs, that are paying taxes, hundreds of millions of dollars, over $100 million annually in taxes we anticipate to bring in with State Question 820 to invest in health care, substance abuse treatment, and education. Those are the things that we need to be looking at. This will give us, the people that really want State Question 820 to fail are the illegal operators. They're the cartels out there, because they know that they would have to compete with that marketplace. Right now, if you don't have a medical card, where do you go buy? You go buy from the black market. You go buy from somebody that's not checking IDs. We've got to have safe legal access. If you've got a loved one out there and they're going to buy, and I know that we're talking about, we have to get past this idea that we could wave a magic wand and not have marijuana, because marijuana is here. If you've got a loved one between 21 and 25, and after 21, we let folks do a lot of things. But if you've got somebody from 21 to 25, or 21 and over really, and they're going to go buy marijuana, don't you want to buy them? Don't you want them to be able to buy it safely? Don't you want to be able to buy it in a regulated environment and pay taxes, that we invest in our education and health care in the state of Oklahoma? To me, that's the difference with an unregulated system that we have right now and the regulations that State Question 820 would give the people of Oklahoma to impose on that system.
When the question specifically was about illegal grows, I think it's really important to understand that we have science and experts in our state on law enforcement. And the fact that every law enforcement agency is unanimously standing on the No on State Question 820 campaign, it's because they know that this is only going to increase illegal grows in Oklahoma. The cartels and all of those individuals already love the fact that we have very low regulations in our state and that it's easy to grow illegally here. And they want the opportunity to do more of that, and that's what legalization does. There's a reason the Sheriff's Association, there's a reason the Association of Chiefs of Police, and there's a reason district attorneys on illegal grows are standing on the no side. So make no mistake, this is not going to improve that situation. It's going to make it worse. We don't have the resources to handle law enforcement now. The sheriffs have actually been pulled off of their normal duties and are trying to help the medical marijuana authority handle the illegal grows now, and they know this is going to make it worse, and that's why they're saying no loud and clear.
And those law enforcement agencies right now don't have the resources that they need. I agree. We need to give law enforcement the tools that they need. 820 gives them new tools and resources. $100 million annually coming into the state, but also county and municipal sales tax that will go directly into their budgets. I know for a fact that sheriffs around the state right now are having a difficult time hiring deputies because they just can't afford to pay a living wage. We need to give them the resources that they need to do that. But make no mistake about this. When we legalize marijuana and we give people a choice between the black market and a legal, regulated, safe dispensary, where are they going to go?
Okay, we're going to talk more about black market marijuana in a second. John, did you have any more?
We're going to leave our questions there for now and come back to you all in a little bit. Thank you both.
Okay,
right,
John,
thanks,
thank
John.
you. The Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics says there are crime syndicates from at least a dozen different countries operating here in Oklahoma.
Dan Snyder found Oklahoma has become a hub for black market marijuana.
It is like trying to hold back the ocean with a broom.
Bust after bust. Law enforcement in Oklahoma has spent the last 2 years fighting a seemingly endless war against illegal marijuana in the state. And it's giving Oklahoma a reputation across the country.
Our law enforcement partners around the U.S. have said Oklahoma is now the #1 producer of black market marijuana.
Woodward says OBN first started noticing illegal operations moving into the state around fall 2020. Then, major grow areas like California and Nevada were shut down for COVID. But Oklahoma...
We're open for business in the state of Oklahoma.
It was really an ideal location for people who were trapped during the pandemic and unable to move their products to the black market.
It wasn't just COVID drawing in the criminal side of the business. Woodward points to cheap land, inexpensive licenses, and some of the loosest restrictions in the country. Those things combined caught the attention of some of the most notorious criminal groups around the world.
We've tied to Mexican drug cartels. We've tied many of them to Chinese money laundering organizations. But we've even got criminal organizations from the Eastern Bloc of Europe, tied to Russia, Slovakia.
These groups have all found ways to skirt current state laws, making themselves look legitimate with straw or ghost owners. That, plus a glut of thousands of grows across the state, makes it harder for OBN to track them down. In all, Woodward says they've shut down around 200 illegal grows over the last 2 years, with another 2,000 under investigation. Agents have seized 200,000 plants and around 30,000 pounds of processed marijuana, all worth billions. It's just a dent in what these groups are bringing in.
When they're growing for $100 a pound and they can sell it for $4,000 a pound in Flushing, New York, or Brooklyn, New York. And so that's $3,900 a pound profit, and sometimes they're moving 2,000-3,000 pounds at a time to the East Coast.
And OBN says these busts are coming with much more than just weed seizures. Officials say with these groups in play, all sorts of crimes are on the table.
We're finding prostitution, we're finding human trafficking, sex trafficking, and gambling operations, and a lot of violence.
That violence was on full display in November when OSBI reported 4 people were executed at a grow outside Hennessy. Woodward says it's not the first killing related to the black market business, but he's also not sure they'll ever have an actual count.
There have been other homicides that we are aware of, but we're not sure how many we will never know about potentially. There's a lot of workers on farms that are undocumented. Nobody would know if they're missing.
Some say recreational marijuana will only make crime worse. Others say we'd actually see crimes go down. Ryan, you believe that. How would that work, though?
Well, right now there's no competition for that illegal black market. If we open this up to a legal, regulated system, strict regulations, safety requirements, taxes, then we're going to make a real dent in the black market. Think of prohibition with alcohol. First of all, these killings that we heard, that was an illegal grow. That's the kind of stuff that we heard about with the prohibition of alcohol. Until we ended that and we began to regulate alcohol. And we had hundreds of thousands of alcohol-related deaths every year. There's not a single death that can be attributed to exclusively marijuana that I know of. But we don't outlaw alcohol because we realized that was a failed experiment. It was much better to end prohibition and regulate and tax it. And so that's what we're proposing here, is to give our law enforcement officers the resources and the tools and the regulatory structure to be able to go after these folks. If you're doing anything illegal, I want to run you out of the state or I want to lock you up. And we'll be able to do that a lot better if we pass Question 820 than if we currently have just 788 right now.
We've already run this experiment in Oklahoma. You just watched a really informative story that showed that before we had medical marijuana, which allowed for legal grows, we didn't have this kind of illegal marijuana grows in Oklahoma. But we took that step and we got so many that law enforcement is overwhelmed with them. And it's very clear that the next step, when we make even more grows legal, that we're going to have more illegal grows because we don't have the regulations in place. This state question does not put the regulations in place to control against this, and there are people waiting to come to Oklahoma because there's going to be more opportunity. Ryan talks about the tax base on law enforcement. I really hope we get into this because this is the biggest fallacy of the state question. This state question is going to increase the number of people struggling with addiction and mental health issues. It's going to increase the number of illegal grows, and they say, but we're going to sell some and get taxes from it and then pay for the consequences, but we're going to grow that happening the whole time, and that's a fallacy. When you have problems from this, and the way you propose to pay for those problems is to tax it, but you're just going to create more and more of those problems, you never get out of that hole. It doesn't work. And we already know that's happening, and that's why we have illegal grows today.
Now, Governor Kevin Stitt said that he thinks marijuana is bad for young people. The CDC also says it can negatively affect teenagers and young adults.
It says about 30% of users have what's called marijuana use disorder, and it says studies have linked marijuana to mental health problems, including schizophrenia.
Now, Terry, you served as a commissioner for Oklahoma's Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse for 13 years. Can you explain what marijuana use disorder is, and should it be a factor when it comes to voting?
I think it's a huge factor. So what happens in the brain, and I'm going to get really nerdy with brain science for just a moment because this is such an important point. Before the prefrontal cortex of the brain is fully developed, which usually happens between the ages of 18 and 25, young brains are much more susceptible to having their addiction circuitry turned on by cannabis and having cannabis use disorder, addiction to marijuana. More importantly, or equally importantly, I should say, the science shows clearly it increases suicidal ideation in young brains, that high-content THC increases the onset of psychosis, schizophrenia, similar symptoms, that would have stayed latent. And the science is so clear about this that the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Psychiatric Association are opposed to legalization and have both stated it's because of what happens in children's brains. And when you legalize, kid use goes up along with use in every other age group. It is the #1 reason why, as the former commissioner of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services and the current CEO of Mental Health Association Oklahoma, that I'm speaking out on this topic because it's the most misunderstood part of this state question and of high-content THC use. Period.
Yeah.
It is dangerous for our children.
Are you concerned with all that?
You know, I want to keep marijuana out of kids' hands. And so with State Question 820, we have strong regulations, safety requirements. And right now, this idea that Oklahomans over 21 are not using marijuana, even without a medical card. A recent study showed that over 100,000 Oklahomans right now are using marijuana without a medical card. Where do we want them to buy that? Do we want them to buy that from a regulated dispensary where they're testing that product to make sure it doesn't have fentanyl in it or that it doesn't have pesticides in it? Or, you know, that's the question that we have to be asking ourselves right now. Marijuana was here before 788. It's definitely here now. It's a matter of what are we going to do with it. We can't go back. We have to move forward. We have to have strong regulations that regulate the entire market, that provide an enormous amount of revenue, hundreds of millions of dollars into education and health care in the state of Oklahoma. You know, we're talking about kids. You know, I'm a dad. I look at all of this through the lens of a dad, even whenever I was drafting State Question 820, because I wanted to be safe. I wanted to have strong safety requirements in there, but I also wanted to fund education. You know, my son goes to one of the best public schools in the state of Oklahoma. He's sharing a science textbook right now. My daughter goes to a great public elementary school. Every year in the fall, they've had to move their classroom because the air conditioners go down. We need these resources in the state of Oklahoma. Right now, this product is being sold. Don't make any mistake about it. It's being sold. It's just a matter of who's profiting from it. Do we want the cartels to profit from it, or do we want the people of Oklahoma to profit from it? And I know that we're talking about these illegal grows, but the best answer to these illegal grows are legal businesses run by Oklahomans. The idea that we're going to have this explosion of new grows, that's just not the case. We have a moratorium in place. We have a moratorium in place on dispensaries. State Question 820 says that for the first 2 years, you had to have had a commercial license for a year prior to the passage of State Question 820. So we're not going to see this huge proliferation of new businesses. People waiting on the outside wanting to come in, they can't come in.
I need to interrupt you. We want to get to John Hayes. Any more questions, comments? We'll get back to you.
Tons of questions. I do want to be respectful of our viewers here. Now, Dania asked, how will drug tests for jobs work if recreational marijuana is legalized? State or federal jobs and school.
Employers can still drug test.
Yeah, I think this is a really important question, and On the brain science question, as you heard, Ryan pivoted from that and then went into illegal grows and funding of education. There is a reason that on the No campaign, the state chamber representing businesses, the Tulsa chamber representing businesses, and the Oklahoma City chamber representing businesses have said no on State Question 820. And one of the reasons for that is this fallacy that the Yes campaign keeps talking about we're going to generate all this money for education and treatment.
It's not a fallacy. And
here's the problem. Studies show that for every dollar that you create when you legalize and tax marijuana, that you create $4.50 in cleanup costs to deal with the consequences, whether that's law enforcement, whether that's the need for treatment. It doesn't actually work. When you do something that increases the negative consequences that are going to happen, the dollars created from it don't pay for it. The other piece that I think is just critically important is to understand that brain science, right now in our state, the door to get help is too narrow. Mental health and substance abuse is the biggest public health problem facing Oklahoma right now. Illegal grows, the biggest law enforcement problem facing Oklahoma. And every expert in this area and the science shows that what happens with 820 is we exacerbate both of those problems. Now is not the time.
We're getting close to the end. 30 seconds for each of you to your closing comments.
You know, talking about employers, they'll still be able to drug test, but a big deal is jobs. Rural Oklahoma, we've created quality jobs all across the state of Oklahoma, and I think that we're going to have $1.8 billion in economic activity that's generated as a result of that. That's going to go directly into these economies. We're going to generate millions in tax revenue to go into education and healthcare. We're going to have a safer, regulated system instead of the black market right now that controls every sale that doesn't take place within the medical marijuana system.
30 seconds, Terry.
I think the most important point is that every state who has legalized marijuana, gone from medical to legal, has seen an increase, and most states estimate, and science shows and data shows, it's a 25% increase in kid use. No one is saying, and when the Yes campaign says we're saying marijuana is illegal, we don't have it, we're not saying we don't have it. We're saying Oklahomans know that we're vulnerable and we can't stand another increase of 25% of more kids using marijuana in our state. The question is it here? It's do we want to make this problem worse in Oklahoma? And the answer to that is no.
All right, we're out of time. Thank you very much.
And we want to thank both of you for taking part, and thank you for joining us for this special edition of News Channel 8.
We hope you feel better informed before heading to the polls. Have a good night. We'll see you back here tonight at 10.
Your voice, your vote. Legalizing recreational marijuana in Oklahoma. This News Channel 8 Town Hall meeting is sponsored by Grow Generation.
18-month financing